Welcome everyone, my name is Tim Burris and today I want to show how you can add JWT Authentication to an existing MVC5 application that's already using cookie authentication. And while that seems like a very kind of crazy and specific situation, this video is for someone who I offered to help get this integrated into their existing application, and I thought, well, maybe it would be useful for others to see how it works as well. So a little backstory on this. The existing web application is already set up and running, and it uses identity and Owin to have a login. So this is just an out-of-the-box web application, MVC5, and all I've done thus far is I've added Owin in with cookie authentication. Now, if you're not familiar with Owin, that's probably a whole topic unto itself, but I'll very quickly kind of document here how it works. So we have this startup authorization class, and in it we're going to use this special attribute called Owin Startup. And what this is going to do is this is going to, when our web application starts, tell the web application to go ahead and call this configuration, and that's going to let us configure all of our Owin authentication. And again, for the cookie authentication, this is kind of what you would expect to see. So this is already implemented and working, and that's what causes us to redirect to our home login whenever we're not logged in. And so that's already there and working. And what we want to do at this point is we want to be able to make some controller calls and be able to authenticate, but without having to actually log in. The reason we want to do that is this particular situation is they want to sort of emulate like an API. And while most of the times you want to create a fully dedicated API project for doing these kind of things, sometimes that's just overkill for exposing a couple of endpoints where you might want to get or post some data. So what we're trying to enable is in this home controller, we would like to be able to make a call and get some data, but not be redirected to login, but allow them to log in. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and create our endpoint that we want to be able to invoke. And so I'm just going to do an HTTP GET, and we'll just call it get some data. Just right here in this class, we'll create a response class, and we'll put a few properties on it. Let's just have a data. And what we'll do here is we will initialize this class, and we'll say this is going to be a new some data. And for the actual data, let's make this date time dot now dot ticks to string. That way, every time we make a call to this action, we'll at least get a different value, and we can be sure that we're not getting cache data or anything like that. So we're going to do that, and we're just going to return this as a JSON payload. So we're just going to say return JSON result. And again, I'm just using a normal web application MVC5, and this is all out of the box stuff aside from the Owin cookie stuff that was already set up. So now with this, we can run our project, and we still get to the login page like we'd expect. But now we are going to try to make an API call to this controller and try to get some data. So this will be the home controller, and the action will be get some data. So we're just going to fire up Postman, and let's actually grab our URL here so that we'll know where to go with Postman. And we'll create a new request here. We'll do this, and it was home, and the endpoint was get some data. Now, because our controller is authorizing, we expect this to not work. We shouldn't be able to make this call. And so we do, and sure enough, we get a response back. It looks like it is a it redirected us to the login page. And that's kind of what we expect. And that's the problem that we're trying to fix here is, we want to be able to expose this JSON result and not have to go to the login page. And so to make this happen, what we are going to want to be able to do is we're going to want to be able to post here, and we're going to want to fetch a JWT token. I'm just going to call this authenticate, and we would accept in a username and a password. And this would be a one-time call. So remotely, our consumer would make a call to authenticate, pass the username and password, and ideally receive back a JWT token that they can use to authenticate with our application and make other requests. So for now, we're just going to return JSON, and it's just going to be token equals empty string for right now. And then once we get our JWT in, we'll come in and put our JWT token in there. And since this will be sort of a login method, we are going to want to allow anonymous here. And so we'll make a post, pass in the username and password. We're going to generate our JWT, which we don't have yet. And then we'll return that JWT token. So let's go ahead and add the necessary scaffolding in for JWT. So we're going to go back over our startup. And again, this was all the cookie stuff. And what we want to do is bring in some NuGet packages. Well, specifically, we'll start with just one. We'll go and manage. And we are going to add Owin security JWT. So we're going to do Owin JWT. Let's just see if we can find it with that. Oh, we're looking in the installed. Let's go over here. Okay, so this is the one we want. Microsoft Owin security JWT. So we'll add this package in. And now with that, we can here we can set up our JWT. And so this is going to work along with cookie. So people will be able to log in and using the login page, or if they happen to pass us a valid JWT, then we'll authenticate them using that. So we'll do app.use JWT bearer. And instead of making you watch me type all of this out, I'm actually going to paste it in, and then we'll go through it. So I'll just paste in this code. We'll do some imports here. And so what we've done here is use our extension method. We're going to create our authentication options, and these are kind of the most simple basic parameters that we can use. We're going to need an audience, an issuer, a signing key, and we are telling our JWT that it should validate the lifetime so that JWT tokens will expire, and we're going to validate that the token they send us was properly signed. And to make all that happen, we'll need to set these three items here. And again, to save you from having to just stare at me type, I'm going to paste these in, and we'll just walk through them. So the issuer and audience and the security key, they really don't matter what you use. The only thing that matters is that this code is saying this is how we're going to validate any tokens we receive. And so any tokens we generate must use the same audience, issuer, and symmetric key. So as long as you are keeping really specifically this key secret, then no one should be able to generate a JWT and kind of fake their way into the system. So we have this here, and this key here, because we are going to use a 256 key encryption, which we'll get into in just a moment, this thing here needs to be 32 bytes long, and it can be whatever we want as long as we have 32 bytes. So I mean, we can just make this my super secret security key that is at least 32 characters. And if it wasn't clear, so the reason it's 32 characters is because we're going to use 256-bit encryption Each character is 8 bits, so 8 times 32 gets us to 256. So as long as we get it at least that long, then we're good. And then the rest of this is just generating the security key. This is just what you're required to do for the JWT. So we'd go and get the key, which is this string. We'll encode it into a byte array, and then we'll create the security key here. And then we're going to use it here. Now, the reason I've put these as static methods down here is we are going to need to use them when we're generating the JWTs as well. Because here we're just talking about how we're going to validate those JWTs. And you probably don't want these as just static functions. You're probably going to put them in web config or app settings or somewhere, depending on where you keep your data. But for our crude little demo here, we are just going to make static methods that just return these static strings. Now that we've added authentication, or at least validation for JWT, we'll just run our project just to make sure we haven't broken anything, and we have. So it looks like we need some more NuGet packages. So we'll just come over and we'll go over here and we'll just add this one in. It looks like it's already installed, but I wonder if it's just that we're using an older version. So I'm just going to update these to the latest package. This is what happens in live demos, and this is what happens with NuGet. While NuGet is amazing, man, sometimes versioning can be a nightmare. So we're going to, let's try this rebuild again. Okay, and there we go. So now we're working again. And so all I did was update these two packages. They were already there from where I installed it a moment ago to 631 from version 5. So good. So now we are at least compiling again. So hopefully that means authenticating JWT tokens is all good to go. Now that's great, but we haven't generated any tokens yet. So let's go over and do that. So here in our authenticate method, this is where we wanted to generate our token. I'm just going to paste in a snippet here. And we'll walk through them. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to get our security key. Now, again, I put these in startup. This is not where you want this stuff to go. You want to create a service or put these in app settings. You want something better, but for the purpose of this demo, this will work. So again, these were the functions that we added here in our startup method for issuer, audience, and symmetric key. And so we're going to use that key here. We're going to create some signing credentials from JWT. And again, these come from that JWT NuGet package we added. So we'll create our signing key, and this is where we're saying that we're using 256-bit encryption, and that's why our key needed to be 32 bytes long to get the 256-bit minimum. We will create our JWT token. We will assign the issuer, audience. We will choose how long this JWT should be valid. We're going to say for 1 hour, and we're going to sign it using these credentials. Now, again, it is, immensely important that these match, that the issuer, audience, and these credentials match what we set up in our validation here. So this is how we're going to validate the token is good, and then here's where we're generating it. So if we're going to generate a token, we have to make sure that we use those same values. And so that's why we're using them from our static method in startup. So let's go, and so now we have our token. Let's return it here. And what we're missing here is this would be your code, but the first thing you would want to do is you would want to validate this username and password, and maybe that's against Entity Framework or Petapoco or Dapper or some other means, LDAP, whatever that is. You're going to want to validate those credentials. So validate credentials, which will likely return a user, but we're not going to do that here in this example. But that's what you would do, and then assuming all that is good, then you're going to build this token and return it. And so now that we have this code in here, I'm going to just run, make sure everything's still good, and now we're going to switch over to Postman. And we are going to authenticate. So this is on the home controller authenticate action. Pass in a user and pass. So we'll go over here. We will take this guy. We'll start a new request. It's going to be a post. We are going to say home authenticate. And in the body, we are going to pass in our username and password. Username will be, and our password. Yes, I typed in asterisk for my password. Okay, so now with that, we should be able to authenticate. We'll run it, and sure enough, okay. So we worked. We hit that endpoint. We said we were going to return a token, and here's our token right here. So fantastic. Now what we want to do is we'll take this token. We will go over to our get method, and in our header, because this is the way JWT authentication works, or at least JWT bearer authentication is, we need to add a header called authorization, and the way bearer tokens work is you always prefix it with bearer space and then the token. So I'm pasting in that token that we just did there, and now we'll run it and see if we get our JSON result. And we did not, but it looks like it's a pretty simple thing. We just need to set our JSON request to allow GET. So we'll swap back over here, and our behavior will allow GET. So we'll rerun that, and we'll now resubmit our request. And yay, so we got data and the ticks. So with that, we at least demonstrated basic setup of authentication. Now let's just make sure a couple of things. Let's make sure that this is working. What if my token was invalid? What's going to happen? Okay, so I'm going to get sent back to login because my token was invalid. So I'm going to change that back to my valid token and ensure, yep, sure enough, and every time we get a different tick. So all that's working. Now that we've just generated a token, but we don't know who the token is for. So they have a valid token, but there's no identifying information in it yet. And so that's probably what we would want is once we call get some data, it's great to know that their token is valid, but what if we need to know who they are? Like, who did they authenticate as? And so we do that by adding claims, and we can build claims right into the token, return the token with those claims, and then when it's submitted, .NET will wire it all up. So we're going to do that right now. So before we actually create the token, let's create a list of claims. So this will be a new list of system.security claim good. And let's put something in there. So we've assumed we went and got a user record here because we validated. So we're going to pretend that we did, and we're going to create two claims. Let's create one for the user ID, and we'll make this a new security claim, and we'll set the type to be system.security.claims. Claim types. They have these built-in constants, and we'll go with SID, which is the primary ID, and we'll say that the value is this would be the ID of your user. And so for our demo, let's go with 75309. Great. And then we're going to create a second claim, so that'll be the primary key of the user, and then we'll also want to just go ahead and include the name of the person. So we're going to go with name, and of course, who else would it be? It's going to be Jenny. And so now we have two claims, one for the name and one for the ID, and we're going to add those into our security token here. And there's already a claims property, and we can just do this. So we will have looked up the user in the database, we'll have their primary key, and we'll include their display name. Typically not the username, but you can put in these claims anything you want. It doesn't have to be these these constants. I mean, you can create your own claim here. So let's go with let's say that this is going to be custom claim, and the value is going to be a custom value. It can be anything you want. You include these claims, they'll get built into the token, they'll be returned, and then when they authenticate with that token, when they make a call in, we'll have access to all of those values. So we have created those three claims, and we'll run it. We'll just make sure that everything is still compiling good. Everything's compiling, but we can't actually see that they're being used because all we did was include them in the token. Let's use them here. So on our sum data, let's make sure that the user ID, when we ask for data, let's return the user ID and the name. And we'll do that here. So the name is pretty easy. That will come from, in the .NET Framework, you can just go with identity, user. So because we're in a controller, it has access to the current user, identity.name. And because we use this constant name, all these claims are going to get wired up. Custom ones will just be claims, but any of these special ones will get wired up to things like the identity name. So we should be able to see the name come in, which will be Jenny. And if we want the user ID, then what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to go to the HTTP context. Actually, I'm sorry, it's not the HTTP context. We will have to go to the system.security.claims. I believe it's principal current. Yes, current. And so this is where all the claims for the authorized authenticated user are. There we go. And we're going to get real nasty here and be as dangerous as we can possibly be. We'll just go first or default X. So, and we'll say X dot first or default. If I would use IntelliSense, first or default X dot type, and that needs to equal our SID here. So we'll just copy this guy, and so we'll find the first claim that's of a SID, and we will get its value. So obviously not real production code, not really what you would hope this to look like, but we'll go to our list of claims for the current user. We'll grab the first one that is a SID, and we'll return its value. And so what we hope to see now is we expect to see those in there. Now, before I run this, we only just now added these claims to the JWT. So this token that I have right here does not have those values embedded. So when I run it, I actually expect those to all be empty because we haven't retrieved a new token since we added those values. But we'll go ahead and run it, and sure enough, we get a new date, but the user and name are null. So we need to go over and request a new token, and now we get a new token. We'll grab this guy, we'll bring it over here, and we'll put it into the header. Again, when you're doing this, make sure you do not replace the bearer space, otherwise it's just not going to work. And now we authenticate, and we get our user 8675309 and our name of Jenny. And what we've demonstrated is that not only did we generate a JWT token, but that when we make a request using that token in the header, it gets validated and it gets wired up to Microsoft's under the hood identity and user information, which lets us know who it is. If we added roles like admin role, standard user role, there's claims for all of those things. So you could add multiple roles. Let's you would do a role of admin. That's a terrible role, but and a role of whatever else, power user. I mean, this is kind of silly, but you'd add multiple roles in based on who they are. Those would get included in the JWT token, and then if you used things like authorize and you said that they needed to be in the admin role, then all that would automatically work because you've embedded in the JWT, and we used Owin here to set up the JWT. So to validate it and wire everything up, and then now you've created an endpoint that you can call as an API, and get all the security and such that you get when you log in with a username and password. So with that, so we've added role admin, we've added admin here, but let's just run this. Let's make sure that I'm not a crazy person. I don't know that this proves that I am or am not. We're going to run this, but we have not retrieved a new token. So this token did not have those roles that I just put into code. And so what I expect to happen is for this to kick us out and say you can't access it. So let's see. Okay, so yep, it redirected us to login, and that's because the reason everything is going to login is because over here in this cookie authentication, not part of what I'm trying to demonstrate here. This is what we do for someone that's not authenticated properly. We can get down into the details and change some of that, but ultimately, if you're not allowed, then that's where you're going. Now, because we've added admin here, if we ask for a new token and grab this, we should now have access again. So we'll go and drop this on here, making sure to leave our bearer, and we'll send that. And now we have access again. So again, on the fly, they're proving that if we include the appropriate roles, then we can get all the functionality of .NET's authorized with roles and all that. Okay, so again, this was for a very specific use case, adding the ability to generate and authenticate JWT tokens in an existing MVC 5 application. It's very similar in .NET Core, so you can follow almost everything. I thank you all for watching. I hope that you all have a fantastic day. Talk soon.